I've cracked the code. The magic word in East Asia is not please or thank you. It's a 4-letter mix that represents your personality called the MBTI. MBTI has taken over East Asia. The younger generation all know their MBTI type. Celebrities on TV talk about it. There's shows based on it and endless merch flood the streets. It's not unheard of for people to choose their dates based on MBTI compatibility. And you even have job postings straight up rejecting certain kinds of personalities. Well, actually, that last example is a pretty big controversy which we'll get into later, but let's take a step back first. What exactly is this MBTI personality test, and why is East Asia so crazy about it? Well, to understand a personality test, let's first define what personality is. According to the APA, personality refers to the enduring characteristics and behavior of an individual, which includes our values, interests, abilities, and emotional patterns. Our personality is what makes us different from one another. An ancient example of a personality assessment is astrology, where you have a sign based on when you were born, and that tells you traits about yourself. The MBTI test, though, is nowhere as ancient as horoscope reading, although it does date back to the 1940s, invented by mother-daughter duo Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. They created this test based on Carl Jung's personality theory to sort women into the industrial workforce after all the men had left to fight in the war. The MBTI works by putting you on opposite sides of 4 spectrums. Based on these dichotomies, you end up with 4 letters to describe your personality, and there are 16 types in total. Once you complete the test, you get all this information about who you are. And these results can be very fascinating to read because you're seeing a third party dissecting your own strengths and weaknesses, who you should be with, what kind of career you should do, when technically you would know best about what you want and what you're good at. As American psychologist Dan P. McAdams puts it, personality tests are the psychology of a stranger, which is why we feel that sense of uncanny relatability when they nail us down. Yet, personality tests are mostly regarded as pseudoscience by the scientific community. They're tests that appear scientific but aren't really backed by science. Given its lack of credibility, why do so many people still swear by it? In the first part, we're going to broadly examine the popularity of MBTI in East Asia and ground this discussion by understanding the psychology behind these tests in general. It's super interesting stuff and it sets the foundation for what is to come, because afterwards, we'll need to talk about this. MBTI is huge, but it has really achieved cult status with the younger demographics. A 2022 survey by Albert Songguk looked at South Korean job seekers in their 20s and reported that 97% of respondents had taken the MBTI. 97%! That is insane. 88% of the respondents then said they believed it captured their personality well. To understand this further young people show for the MBTI, I'll need to introduce 2 concepts, the idea of ego identity and the Barnum effect. Ego identity, as defined by the APA, is the experience of the self as a recognizable, persistent entity. In other words, ego identity is the sense of knowing who we are. Research has shown that having weak ego identity can have adverse health effects on us, both mentally and physically. And Erik Erikson, who formulated the concept of ego identity, says it's especially important for adolescents. Given their emergence into adulthood, they may fall into an identity crisis if they don't have a strong sense of who they are. Since our ego identity is important for our development and mental and physical well-being, what is something that can help us with strengthening it? Or what is something that can help us with getting to know ourselves better? Who would have thought? Personality tests. Lee and Park's study on adolescents showed those who participated in astrology counseling developing higher self-awareness than their counterparts who did not attend. Exposure to content that provides insight into us, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, can lead to more introspection. Personality tests therefore fulfill our need for a stronger ego identity, and this is particularly important for adolescents. Now, the other concept related to personality tests is the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect is a cognitive bias where people tend to see very vague descriptions as accurate reflections of themselves, and was first linked to astrology. The Barnum effect gets stronger if these vague descriptions are positive, because that will trigger a flattery effect and a subjective validation effect. I hate using terms to explain terms because this is like looking in a dictionary for a word and not knowing the word they're using to explain your word. So bear with me for a second. The flattery effect, I think most of us can already guess. It's when people are more willing to believe things things that show them in a good light. The subjective validation effect is when you personally relate to a fact or think it's true, so then it must be true for everyone else because it was true for you. All these factors and cognitive biases makes personality tests really alluring to us and also very convincing. In fact, Swan and Reed suggest that once we form certain perceptions of these readings, people will try to justify them and make it a self-fulfilling prophecy, which goes to show how much influence these tests can have on us. Though dabbling into personality tests can be fun, provoke introspection, and strengthen our ego identity, sometimes this enthusiasm goes too far. With the theory now out of the way, from this point on, we're full steam ahead into the MBTI takeover of East Asia. This is the plan. We're going to look at MBTI for China and Korea, and we're going to save Japan for later because they have their own test and we will need to talk about that as well. Starting off with China and Korea. It's common for young people in China these days to introduce themselves and then bring up the phrase, I'm an I person or I'm an E person. On social media, the MBTI hashtag in China has over 4.2 billion views on Weibo, the Chinese equivalent of Twitter. Even universities like Beijing's Institute of Technology have started to include questions on MBTI to bring more compatible roommates together. In Korea, the MBTI is even more loved there. As early as June 2020, the Korean population had taken more personality tests than Europe and the US combined. A Hankook research survey taken that December found that over half of Koreans had taken the MBTI test, which is incredible and a bit scary at the same time. Why is it that East Asia seems to live and breathe MBTI? One important aspect of getting type that we haven't talked about yet is how personality tests sort you into a group. Given the cultural backdrop of East Asia, this is a big deal because of the cultural emphasis on group harmony and belonging. Knowing your type, therefore, is a quick way to establish in-groupness, to know where you belong and to be one of us. But the perception of MBTI being everywhere largely comes from how frequently it's brought up in social interactions, like if you're meeting new people or if you're on a date. And there's two reasons why MBTI has become inevitable when you're meeting someone in East Asia. The first is that MBTI has become a social lubricant. Instead of going through that awkward phase of figuring out what you have in common, by bringing up MBTI, you automatically speak the same language. Hu Xiaofan, who is 25, says, the assessment not only makes a lot of sense, but also saves me from awkward silences when I have to socialize with strangers. Being an introvert, at least I can ask that question of what their personality type is and get the conversation rolling. Obviously, the strategy only works because everyone knows their type already. And honestly, I'm all for this if it means we don't have to do all 4 icebreakers anymore. Do you guys remember that? Like 2 truths, 1 lie, or tell us something interesting about yourself? Those were the most stressful moments ever because I always realized I've literally nothing interesting about me to share, whilst the person before me just talked about how they once dated a first-gen K-pop idol. True story. 25-year-old Seoul Uni student Ida Hyun elaborates on how the MBTI helps. I don't need to go on and talk about myself. I can save time by saying I'm ENFP, and they can understand what kind of person I am. Translator's note, ENFPs are known to be energetic and friendly. Lee continues, everyone knows one's type and the personality of that type nowadays. So which type struggles with falling asleep the most? Because I often lie on my bed for ages, unable to sleep since my brain will be racing with thoughts like how I can optimize a thumbnail or explain a paper I just read, or remembering how when I was a kid, I lost a competition, started crying, ran away in embarrassment, and then tripped right in front of everyone. Amazing what you think about when you're just trying to fall asleep. But it wouldn't be fair of me to bring up this problem to you guys without a solution. And that's where today's sponsor, Manta Sleep, comes in. They were very generous to send me 2 masks, and I've been especially loving the Manta Sleep mask sound. I usually listen to brown noise to fall asleep because it helps distract me from all that thinking, so I've been really loving the sound feature of this mask. It's Bluetooth, so you can easily connect to your favorite playlist or whichever ASMR video you like, and you can even adjust the position of the headphones, which is this blue tab over here. Of course, the mask in itself is really lightweight and comfortable. I don't feel anything sleeping on my side, which is super important to me, and it blocks out all the light. The sound mask is my favorite, but Manta has so many options like the silk mask, the weighted mask, a cool mask, a steam mask. There's something for everyone. Sleep is so important, and we spend a third of our lives either sleeping or attempting to do so. So I think investing for a higher quality of sleep is one of the best choices you can make for yourself if you don't have time to sleep more. You can check out all their Sleep masks with my link below, and make sure to use my code AINI for 10% off your order. Thank you Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and now back to our discussion of MBTIs in social situations. The second usage of bringing up MBTI when you meet people is efficiency. Once you exchange types, you technically should have an idea of what kind of person they are and what type of things they be into. So the MBTI becomes a filter for who you'd want to get to know better. This sentiment is elaborated on by Yun, a student who says, "I consider personality more important than appearances in a relationship, so I don't think I'll try meeting someone whose type is not compatible with mine." Now, it might be okay for individuals to do this using MBTI as a filter, but what about when businesses also reject certain personality types? A cafe in Seoul went viral in 2022 when they listed this job posting: "We hire people based on their MBTI results." ENTJs, ESFJs, INFPs, INTPs, and INTJs are not allowed to apply. Most comments on social media were shocked that they listed out specific MBTIs that they would reject and thought this was taking MBTIs too far. Then you have Ad9, another Korean company recruiting for a marketer and thanosing the candidates, literally, because they only wanted extroverts, people with an MBTI starting with E. MBTI bleeds into bigger corporations too. Bank asked their applicants for their MBTI, and instead of asking the usual, "What are your strengths or weaknesses?" they asked, "What strengths or weaknesses do you think your MBTI has? And what job position do you think fits your MBTI most?" Seriously, who are we really interviewing here? Should I change my CV headshot to one of these guys as well? Finally, if companies asking for MBTIs weren't a shock enough, personality types were also used in South Korea's presidential candidate elections as a way to sway the younger generation. In 2022, South Korea's current president Yoon Suk-yeol typed himself as an ENFJ, the same type as former US President Barack Obama. If you're a bit shocked at how integrated the MBTI is in the social and professional parts of life in East Asia, well, surprise, there's another cultural element I suspect is related to it, and this is the legitimacy of group affiliations, which is how acceptable it is for people to judge someone based on their group identity. In East Asia, it's very acceptable to make assumptions of someone based on their family, friends, or nationality. This keenness on associating people with groups means that the MBTI can be very easily integrated into existing forms of thinking. MBTI is basically Christmas for us East Asians. You get to neatly categorize people in groups, and then you're also justified in making assumptions on that person based on what group they're in. What more could you possibly ask for? These factors are probably the biggest reasons why the MBTI is everywhere in East Asia. And when there's so much interest in something, well, you know what they say. Where there's an opportunity, there's a capitalistic bird ready to swoop in. And it brings with it MBTI tteokbokki, MBTI beer, MBTI hats, MBTI K-pop albums, keyrings, coffee cups, personalized shopping icons, anything you can think of can be MBTI-ified. What if in the future, instead of debating between 2 or 3 bathrooms, we start seeing 16? By this point, we've spoken a lot about MBTI and its popularity in China and Korea. The thing is, the MBTI was not the first personality test that took over East Asia. In fact, just a few decades ago, the personality test that everyone knew about originated from Japan. This test is still very well known in Japan today, but it became quite problematic because this personality test became something you could actually fail. This is Japan's ABO blood test. The ABO blood test sorts people based on your blood type, and it was proposed by psychologist Furukawa Takeji in 1927. This whole typing people by blood, though, has a bit of a dark past. In the 1900s, Australian scientist Karl Landsteiner discovered the 4 blood types, and since his discovery, blood types were used in the 19th century to push ideas of racial supremacy. Western scientists in particular used type B blood as proof that Asians were inferior, since according to them, most Asians had type B blood, just like how most animals did. Obviously, this claim is not true. Nonetheless, blood types kind of got off to a bad start. But 30 years later, it's brought to the public's attention again, and this time, like we said, it's by Furukawa. Furukawa proposed that blood types affect a person's temperament, and he made a few observations. People with type A blood are said to be well organized. They like it when things are neat, but they can also be stubborn, sensitive, and can get stressed stressed easily. People with type O blood are said to be optimistic and outgoing, but they can also be insensitive and unpunctual. People with type B blood are creative and curious, but they may also be selfish. And finally, people with type AB blood are seen as complicated. Since having this blood type is rare, they have quite the eccentric image. To back up these observations, Furukawa used a very convincing argument called "Trust Me Bro," and that was the foundation of his thesis, a study of temperament and blood groups. Despite academics coming out afterwards to challenge his findings, his lack of empirical evidence, and the fact that they couldn't replicate what he had found, the blood type theory had already taken off. Since blood typing was introduced as an academic theory at first, most people saw it as a scientific way of understanding people and gave it more credibility than other folk interpretations like palm reading. But what really made this theory soar in popularity and become common knowledge was actually some 40 years later when journalist Naomi Masahiko published a book titled Understanding Affinity by Blood Type. Naomi's book was built off Furukawa's blood type theory, but instead of approaching it scientifically, he adopted it to fit popular taste. This was a very smart move, as his books began flying off the shelves and talk of blood types was everywhere in Japanese media. Similar to how MBTI is used in East Asia currently, during the peak of ABO blood type beliefs, this test was also used as a way of socializing and getting to know someone better. Yamori Katsuya, a professor at Kyoto University, suggests a unique application of the blood type theory. He claims that it had been adopted by the Japanese as a convenient tool for answering rather insignificant questions in everyday life. For example, one student might ask another, "Why is Miss Connis so strict about dress code at school?" And their friend might say, "Because she's type A." It's not like you're ever going to square up to the school principal and ask, so you might as well come up with a neat little explanation for self-reassurance. Because of how integrated blood type theory is to Japanese people, Yamori emphasizes that its social psychological significance meant the theory stayed widely accepted despite its dubious reliability. Blood typing at its peak was again, like the MBTI, also integrated in the corporate sphere. In the 1990s, Mitsubishi Electronics hired a team mostly comprised of people with type AB blood, because type ABs were thought to be good planners. Blood types have also been used as a criteria for job recruitment and even school entrance exams. This led to the Japanese government eventually intervening to officially warn companies not to include blood type questions in applications. But that didn't stop hiring managers from sneakily asking about your blood type in an interview. Regardless, if you're able to show one type favoritism, you're able to disfavor a type. And in the case of Japan, this was type B. Type Bs, as described by Naomi, were selfish. They had an ego and they disliked social order. Every blood type had their pros and cons, but the impression of type Bs just grew to become overwhelmingly negative. This description led to a social issue known as purahara, short for blood harassment. Type B is known as the most disadvantaged blood type in Japan because of all these negative traits that are associated with the type. The discrimination for type Bs sometimes gets so bad that you have closeted Bs, where people will lie about their blood type to avoid the stereotypes. And I'm sure it doesn't help when in 2011, Japanese Reconstruction Minister Matsumoto Ryu was forced to resign. He blamed the problematic behavior on his blood type. "My blood type is type B, which means I can be irritable and impulsive, and my intentions don't always come across." Brilliant. I'm sure all the type Bs love that. The public asked for one small step down for Matsumoto, and he decided to take one giant leap backwards for all of type Bs. This discrimination for type Bs is believed to be strengthened by the population ratio. In Japan, roughly 40% of the population is type A, 30% is type O, 20% is type B, and 10% is type AB. ABs don't actually get picked on that much despite their rarity because they're so rare that people don't know if ABs actually fit the stereotype. But a few nasty experiences with the type B just reinforces that selfish, uncooperative stereotype that's being spread. We love a good confirmation bias. Nakaminet highlights how your blood type can be weaponized in everyday situations, with examples like being asked if you're type O if you opened a bag of candy too forcefully, or if you're type A, you might be scolded with, "You're not organized enough to be type A." In the case of type B, you don't even have to detail what expectation they've missed to inflict emotional damage. You just have to say, "Yup, you're type B." The popularity of blood typing and the usage of these stereotypes in everyday life saw the Japanese Broadcasting Ethics and Program Improvement Organization in 2004 sending requests to TV shows and media asking them to stop encouraging people to believe someone's personality was influenced by their blood type. As a result, the blood type personality theory is not as big now, but many people still know about it and it's still relevant today. Our talk on blood type was very focused on Japan, but this test did spread to other East Asian countries and gained a lot of popularity there too. Honestly, there's a lot of similarities between the ABO blood test and the MBTI, so I guess every generation experiences this kind of fascination with personality tests. As we reach the end of this video, I just wanted to tie everything we talked about together. We looked at two different but very popular personality tests, being the MBTI and the ABO blood type theory. And the more I looked into it, the more I felt like its use cases resembled horoscope readings. Now, I'm not saying that they're the same thing. I don't want to piss off two very passionate communities at the same time, but a lot of the psychology behind horoscopes is found in personality tests and vice versa. I know a lot of people hold the view that horoscopes and personality tests are mostly fake because they're not reliable or scientifically backed, and I'm not here to debate that, but I hope this video does allow you to understand what kind of purpose personality tests serve in East Asia, because other than sparking more introspection, they also serve as an important socializing agent and are an easy way to categorize people into groups, a mentality that is very familiar for East Asians. Alright, this was a very chatty video essay. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these chattier, lighter videos. And for those of you who are wondering what my MBTI is, it's no fun if I tell you. Guess. Thank you for watching all the way until the end, and please subscribe if you enjoyed. Maybe try out one of these personality tests if you haven't already. And if you know your type, put it down in the comments below. I'm really curious to know what everyone is. A big shout out and thank you as well to my patrons. You guys are my first ever patrons, and I'm so grateful for your support, so thank you so much again. I also uploaded a bonus commentary looking into the rise of personality tests during periods of uncertainty, and how the ABO blood type theory gained ground in Japan during a period of major social cultural change. And you can hear all of this for free right now as a trial member. If you want to check out my Patreon, I have it in the link below. If you want to be alongside me whilst I work on the next video, you can find me here. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Sleep tight. Bye.